Howdy guys, hope everybody's having a wonderful day. Footage I got today is of the Skidder. The February's been the worst daggone month this year. Daggone. January, February, this winter sucked down in our area. Wetter than normal and all this crap. And we had quite a few repair jobs to do. We've had truck motors, loader motors, skidder transmissions. I was screwing on a chainsaw, and we done a bunch of work in the file room. We're organizing, getting prepared for this year. We're going to have a good year. Right now, we're in the shop organizing and working on things. The transmission in our 648H Skidder, it finally, the other day I was skidding, me and Roger was working in December, and the daggone thing quit pulling in 5th and 6th gear. So we thought it was electrical. You know how those of you out there that's running the John Deere Skidders, you know how you got the electrical mess. Which the H's are way better. I will say the H's are way better than the G3s. And the way they routed their their wiring in their transmission above the 624 or 648H worked out really good. Ain't had hardly any electrical problems or chafing or anything like that in this Skidder. But what we did get is the Skidder quit pulling 5th and 6th gear. Alright, on a John Deere Skidder, you got your directional clutches, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is up top. And John Deere's got a constant mesh transmission. Those of you that's not familiar with it, if you want to get into it, familiarize yourself with it on the internet or whatever. But you got your top clutch drums, your 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's the front and back of the clutch drums. So there's 2 drums up top, one with clutches on each end of it, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on the bottom is your speed clutches, and that's your A, B, C, D. Okay? So what you get into is you got your electrical going to your solenoids, and you can do a calibration of the transmission to test that out. You know, your electrical, it tests out your transmission basically. Well, it kept failing calibration. I pulled it in the shop, checked it out, kept failing calibration. And I'm like, daggone, I checked the wiring looks good. Solenoids appears to be activating because we checked the pressures at the clutches themselves. There's a port in front of the transmission, valve bank there where you can check the port pressures. And what we got to do, and me and Perry got to checking our pressures, and if you let the clutch out in 5th and 6th gear, it won't even move the Skidder with the blade up. You know, the Skidder just sitting there, won't move it. The Skidder in 7th gear, which activates clutch 1 and directional clutch 1 and speed clutch, I forget what letter, but not B. And if we let it out and we check the pressure on clutch 1, which was also activated in 5th and 6th gear, clutch 1 would go ahead and kill the Skidder at 50 pounds. The Skidder with your brakes on, it would kill it at 50 pounds of clutch pressure. Well, then we got so he's like, all right, well, the other clutch that gets activated in clutch 5th and 6th is clutch B on the bottom and the speed side. So we check clutch B, and the pressure gauge, we'd run it all the way up to 150 pounds on the pressure gauge, and at 150 pounds, the Skidder still wouldn't move. So he's like, oh my gosh. And then when we tried the calibration test, it said check your transmission for repair your transmission, which is like, oh my gosh. So we pulled it out, sent it up to Dan, and Dan up the shop, Dan and Derek takes it apart, and then Dan discovers that a clutch drum, the weld in the clutch drums itself inside the transmission had broke. It was a factory had a clutch up at Bear Hollow, had a clutch drum up at Bear Hollow out of a G2 or G3, which is the same transmission as a 624H. And we pulled the drum out of it, brought it down, got new clutches and bearings and seals and that type sort of thing. Dan, with Derek's help, put the transmission all back together. I think it was kind of Dan's baby, but him and Derek both worked on it. And they bring it back to me, and I put it back in the Skidder. This is clutch calibration. The last time when it got to clutch B is when it'd kick out, where a busted drum was. We're at 4, now we're getting ready to start down the letters. Here we go, Roger. Can't zoom in. It's moving the skidder anyway, just jerking on us. It wouldn't do that before. What bar you been with? We about done. We're calibrating it now.
I said nobody else put me up.
We're almost done. We're calibrating it. We's YouTubing too. That's the boss lady. She's sassy. She's been bossing me around for years, Roger. She says we need to clean up after ourselves. Little sassy ass. I think it's about done. Ah!
Yeah.
We made it! Well, there you go, Roger.
What you do to my ship?
I had it all apart. I had every. So we turned the cab over, and this thing fell out. Got to the end of the rope, jerked on this, and this was in forward when it done it. And there's little rollers in there. A speck of dirt got in a roller and blocked it from shutting the switch off. So we had to take all this apart, investigate it, to where you can put it back together and then try the transmission again. Find out the transmission's got to come out anyways. I'll get everything put back together.
No, well, okay, I can pull it up when I want.
You drive, Roger be driving by and be playing the video game right there. Slap.
Hardwick can do that.
He play, what's that old daggone game they used to play? Son of a butt. Pong. Roger being there playing Pong.
Pac-Man.
Pac-Man or Pong or whatever they was.
Yeah, Pac-Man.
All right, I ordered a part for this thing. It's called a short block, and it come from Husky. It's a Husqvarna part. It's a Husqvarna. It's from Husqvarna, and the idea is, anytime I've tried to split the saw and put it back together, it's usually the beginning of the end, it seems like. So I thought, heck, I could kind of, you know, cheat death a little bit here and get it already assembled, already running together. It feels good. No, it don't feel no resistance or nothing. I mean, it's a good scenario there. But I have to strip my saw and move all the components over to the short block here. So we'll get started. This thing's looking really good. What I've noticed so far, I'm about halfway in through this, and I'm starting to put as much back on or more back on than what I'm taking off. What I'm noticing, this saw's got a bit of time on it. It's not a new saw, but everything looks clean, looks good. I think, I don't know if that has anything to do with the auto tune part of it or not, but the saw's hanging together good as far as staying clean. Mechanic wise, I think it's easy to work with. I think this saw is easier to work with than a 395. The only thing is like the primary and secondaries on a carburetor. It's kind of different than a normal carburetor on a normal chainsaw. But you have to be careful about a few things putting that together. But on a 395, the stuff you put together on it, you can break easy. And these parts on this thing, I think it's more mechanical friendly, to be honest with you. I think it's a more mechanical friendly chainsaw to work on. And now, if I wasn't such a tightwad, I'd put a new piston and jug on there. But it's got a new jug. The jug's new. The jug's only, I broke that spark plug, I screwed the threads up in that spark plug that time, and it's got a pretty new jug on it. And I ain't replacing the gasket. The gasket looks fine. None of it stayed with the old saw, with the old block. So if I can get that flywheel off without tearing anything up, I think we'll be in good shape. One thing I do want to say, most of you out there probably know this, but this is a Husqvarna. So when you're putting a Husqvarna together, don't forget your blue and red Loctite. I put Loctite on almost every screw. The screws towards the end, maybe some of the cover screws and carburetor screws and stuff like that, maybe not, but everything down in the saw, make sure you're putting Loctite on, because it is a Husqvarna. It is going to shake apart if you don't. I'm here to tell you, I'm at this point with the saw, got the jug, flywheel, all that stuff on, and I've come to this conclusion. Husky's really fixed a bunch of things with this saw that I'm telling you, it's a way better saw. One of the things I just dig the crap out of is when they do this stuff. So here's your spring, and they got this overextension cable on here that locks into your short block here. And I'm gonna tell you, cutting timber, it happens to everybody. We're all human. You get pinched, you get pissed, the skidder man's gone, you're too wore out to wedge yourself out, or else you can't get a wedge in there, and you're too tired to chop with a hatchet, so you yank on your saw. You know, everybody does it, or I do, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So to have
to have a feature like this on it, I mean, to me, that is impressive. So you go to yank, you can't overextend that spring. Now, I did pull a mount out up here one time, and I had the hillbilly make me one. That's actually a 395 spring modified to fit this 592. But I have pulled out that spring. But once these mounts start going, 395s is, I thought, was pretty bad about it, because it is a powerful saw, and it was heavy in a lot of places where they lighten this saw up, and that extra mass kind of adds to it, if you see what I mean. So the fact that this saw's lighter, then there ain't that much mass if you're yanking or jerking or pulling, you know, to overpower and tear up a spring, that's, to me, that's a pretty good thing. So another thing I wanted to cover, I've always in the past had trouble with the muffler staying on, and Husky's done a real good job of, they used 3 big bolts in a triangle, which is pretty good. It's like your strongest geometrical shape. I don't know if it has anything to do with it or not, but it just is cool. And then they got this cap you put on, use red Loctite on your nut screw, and it'll hold all 3 of them on. So in the past, the mufflers in the past on the 395s, man, I always had trouble with them. Always. And the 395, the muffler would connect to the jug and then also connect to the short block. And in this one, what they've done is they've just put the muffler on a jug. So the muffler is only on the jug. I don't know if that'll show up later, like in a broken scenario on the jug mounted to the chassis there, but so far that's treated me real well. And I've had this muffler over a couple times through my spark plug issues and all that stuff, and so far nothing's backed off. And on a 395, man, that's something you got to battle. So that's pretty cool. I wanted to mention that while it was fresh on my mind. The oiler screw thing, mine got messed up, and it's got like a ring around it. The way it's molded into plastic. Well, what happens a while back, my oiler come apart and chewed all that stuff up in there. I didn't even know it. You know, I put the new oiler in, put everything together, went to working fine. Never thought twice about it. But that ring, the flange of this oiler screw, the black oiler screw that sits down in there that spins, that thing had come apart on me, and I didn't know it. If I was to do this properly, I would get a new oiler thingamabob and put on there. But I've got to cut timber Monday. In 2 days I'm gonna be laying some walnut down, so I have to have this saw running. So I end up putting my slopped up one that was broke back in there. It was working. It was one piece that was working fine, but I went and put it back in there and just super glued it in. The other problem area, something I ain't figured out yet. I'm sure when this plastic goes on that the carburetor, the bottom carburetor, the main one, the primary, I'm sure it's supposed to roll up into that plastic like this as you put it on. And putting it on in the saw, you kind of push down like this. Well, what happens, this little stud that sticks up right here, that son of a buck turns into an issue. I've only had that apart twice, and both times it's been a son of a buck. And I don't know, I just end up getting pissed off, and taking my tongers and just shoving it in there. And it's cut, it ain't done right, the rubber's in rough shape. It is sealing up for whatever it is. I'm sure it's just to keep dust out, but it's sealed up good enough for that, but it ain't right. Them's your only two problem areas with doing this whole project. As long as you focus and pay attention to what you're doing, blue Loctite, red Loctite, try to look at the factory screws and see what they had on them, because they know what the factory, you know. And I'm putting blue Loctite where I don't see red Loctite, and I'm putting red Loctite on all the ones I see red Loctite on. They use both at the factory. I'm sure they got a reason for it. But the Loctite with the Husqvarna is important. Fill her up with oil and gas. It's got gas in it, but the oil's drained. Act. Fingers crossed. Hi, Puzzle Watson. Back. Might take a minute to prime my gas up. Now, you all know I had trouble with it. That saw, I showed you the tree cutting or whatever. I bought found this kit somehow. Might have been one of you guys that sent it. But I'd punctured this diaphragm, this plastic diaphragm, clear diaphragm. In the repair kit, it got an actual black diaphragm, which, if anybody orders a kit or something and sees that and like, what, that's the wrong kit, it looks like it fits perfect. I had went ahead and bought a new carburetor and put on my saw. There's the kit number. Now, I don't know if this chip needs redone or what, but I was having a little trouble getting my saw started, so I went ahead and pulled this off and put on my saw. But I don't know if I just didn't have my gas backed off that bad or whatever, because I'd actually changed some things out and got a bunch of air in the fuel system. So I don't know. But when I put the new one on and cranked it up again, then it fired up finally after a few cranks. So I don't know if that was an issue or not. But I do know if you get in a hurry or you get frustrated, you need to take your time if you go to doing that carburetor and stuff, and make sure you don't spaz out like I did and poke a hole in your diaphragm. Now, I know I didn't get footage of the saw running since it's fixed. It runs great. Been cutting up ties with it and stuff. I ain't cut no timber with it since I fixed it, but it runs good. I ain't got no footage of Roger skidding yet because daggone it won't stop acting stupid. I don't know what's going on with Mother Nature, but I think she needs to take some PMS medication or something. I'm just kidding. All right, everybody, thank you. Have a good one later on.